Thank you, God, for bringing Daddy home safe, even when he's always working." The words froze him where he stood. When Daniel Mercer stepped into his mansion at lunchtime, unannounced, jet-lagged, still gripping his leather briefcase, he expected silence. Cold marble floors, closed doors, the familiar distance that had grown between him and his 3 5-year-old daughters since success had swallowed his time. Instead, he saw something that made his heart stumble. Under the warm glow of the chandelier sat Lily Rose and Emma, their small hands folded, eyes closed, smiling as they prayed. The image alone would have been enough to shatter him, but what truly stole his breath was who stood beside them. It wasn't Clara Whitmore, his elegant fiancée, the woman who insisted discipline and perfection were the only paths to refinement. It was Aisha Johnson, the new housekeeper, a black woman hired barely weeks ago, still wearing her plain uniform and bright yellow gloves. There was no stiffness in her posture, no fear in her eyes. Only tenderness. Only presence. On the table wasn't gourmet food or imported delicacies. There was a steaming bowl of homemade spaghetti, simple and fragrant, filling the room with a warmth Daniel hadn't felt since his own childhood. Aisha gently reminded the girls to blow on their food so they wouldn't burn their mouths, her voice soft, almost maternal. Hidden in the hallway, Daniel felt like an intruder in his own home. Yet for the first time, he also felt hope. In that single quiet moment, he realized something profound had changed. While he had been chasing success across oceans, someone else had given his daughters what money never could comfort: safety and love. The contrast revealed itself slowly, then all at once, like stepping from shadow into light. With Aisha, the room breathed. The girls laughed with their mouths full, their feet swinging freely beneath the table. There were no sharp corrections, no whispered warnings about posture or stains. When Emma spilled a bit of sauce on the tablecloth, Aisha only smiled, wiped it gently, and whispered, "It's okay, baby. Messes can be cleaned. Hearts are harder." The girls relaxed as if their small bodies finally understood they were safe. But with Clara Whitmore, everything changed. Daniel remembered countless dinners where silence ruled like law. Crystal glasses aligned perfectly, backs straight, elbows tucked in. Clara's eyes missed nothing, every crumb, every giggle, every breath taken too loudly. Sit properly, chew slowly. Young ladies don't behave like that. The girls had learned to eat cautiously, as if dinner were an exam they could fail. They smiled then too, but those smiles never reached their eyes. Watching now from the hallway, Daniel felt shame crawl up his spine. He had mistaken control for care. He had applauded Clara's obsession with refinement, believing structure would compensate for his absence. He hadn't seen how fear had replaced joy at his own table. Aisha asked nothing of the girls except that they be children. She didn't demand gratitude, yet she received it effortlessly in the way Lily leaned into her side, in how Rose watched her with quiet trust, in how Emma whispered prayers that included her name. This wasn't rebellion against discipline. It was something deeper, something truer. And Clara, polished, beautiful, admired by everyone outside these walls, had no idea what was slipping through her fingers. Because love cannot be forced into obedience, and respect cannot grow in fear. Daniel loosened his tie, his chest tight. He realized the painful truth: the warmth filling his dining room had not come from wealth, design, or status. It came from a woman society barely noticed, whose kindness required no permission, and whose presence demanded no power. In that moment, Daniel understood something irreversible. One woman ruled the house. The other was quietly building a home. The moment shattered not with a scream, but with a sound. Porcelain. It hit the wall and exploded. The laughter died instantly. Daniel didn't move. He couldn't. From the shadows of the hallway, he watched Clara Whitmore storm into the dining room, her heels sharp against marble, her smile gone, her voice cutting. The girls froze the way children do when they recognize danger before they understand it. Emma's fork slipped from her hand. Lily's shoulders tensed. Rose shrank into her chair. "What is this?" Clara snapped, staring at the simple meal like it was an insult. Carbohydrates again. Aisha stepped forward instinctively, slow, calm, placing herself between Clara and the girls without even realizing it. "They were hungry," she said softly. "They hadn't eaten much today." That was when Clara laughed. A laugh without warmth, without humanity. She grabbed Rose's plate and hurled it against the wall. Red sauce splattered like a wound across white paint. The girls screamed. Rose ran to Aisha, clutching her legs, shaking. Lily and Emma followed, sobbing into her apron. "Get away from her," Clara shouted. "She's filling your heads. You're spoiled ungrateful." "Enough." Daniel's voice split the room. Clara turned stunned. For the first time, her mask cracked. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. I saw everything. Silence fell like ash. Daniel walked forward past the mess, past the fear, past the woman he thought he loved. He knelt, pulling his daughters close, feeling their tears soak into his shirt. "No one," he said, steady and cold, "will ever speak to my children like that again." Clara tried to speak, to cry, to explain, but the truth had already spoken louder. Daniel stood and looked at Aisha, still kneeling, still holding his daughters. Her hands trembling, her eyes full of worry for them, not herself. In that moment, the decision wasn't dramatic. It was absolute. One woman had ruled his house with fear. The other had protected his children with love. And Daniel knew without doubt, without hesitation, that some doors once closed should never be opened again. Daniel did not explode that night. That was the part that frightened Clara most, though she didn't know it yet. Instead, he became quiet, careful, present in a way he had never been before. He kissed his daughters goodnight, promised them food, safety, warmth. He told Aisha softly, "Go rest. I'll handle this." And when the house finally slept, Daniel didn't. He watched. The cameras he had installed months ago for security, forgotten, ignored, came alive on the screens in his study. Kitchen, hallway, dining room. Every corner where truth thought it was alone. What he saw over the following hours erased the last doubt in his mind. Clara's voice changed the moment she thought no one important was listening. Sharp, cruel, calculated. Aisha's never did. Even exhausted, even humiliated, even afraid. And then Daniel saw it. Clara's hand, her bracelet, slipping into Aisha's worn canvas bag like a magic trick performed by someone who had practiced cruelty for years. Daniel leaned back in his chair, eyes burning not with rage but with clarity. The next evening, he let the trap close. Dinner was formal. Candles, crystal. Silence stretched thin as glass. Clara smiled too much, watched the bag too closely. When she gasped, an accused voice trembling with rehearsed shock, Daniel let it play out. Let the bracelet fall onto white linen. Let the girls cry. Let Aisha drop to her knees in disbelief. Then he stood. "Before anyone speaks," Daniel said calmly, "I think we should watch something." The screen lit the room like judgment. There was Clara, clear as daylight, planting the evidence, smiling. The sound of Clara's world collapsing was not loud. It was small, guttural, animal. Daniel didn't shout. He opened the door. "Leave," he said. "Now." 5 minutes or the police arrive with the footage. Clara begged, threatened, cursed. None of it mattered. Later, when the house finally exhaled, Daniel knelt in front of Aisha. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "I should have protected you sooner." Aisha nodded, tears slipping silently. She believed him. But fear lingered. And love, real love, sometimes sacrifices itself. That night, Aisha packed quietly. Before dawn, she was gone. And when Daniel found the note keys beside it, yellow gloves folded neatly, his knees gave way. Because for the first time in his life, the man who had everything realized the most valuable thing he had ever been given had walked away. Not out of anger, but out of love. The house felt wrong without her, not quiet empty. Daniel stood in the kitchen long after sunrise, staring at the folded yellow gloves and the note that had been written with trembling care. Aisha hadn't blamed him. That hurt more than anger ever could. She had left to protect the girls, believing her presence was a liability, believing love meant disappearance. Upstairs, the truth arrived like a siren. "Daddy, where's Aisha?" Emma's voice cracked first. Then Lily's. Then Rose's quiet sob, clutching a stuffed bear like a life raft. They refused breakfast, refused school, refused comfort that didn't come from the woman who had taught them safety without fear. Daniel listened, and then he heard it. The toy bear crackled to life in Rose's hands, static. Then a voice Daniel would have recognized even in the dark. Clara's. Cold. Poisoned. "You're a burden. Your father doesn't want you. Smile or I'll throw this away." Daniel felt something inside him break cleanly in two. This wasn't just cruelty, it was violence. Within minutes, phones were ringing. Investigators, lawyers, screens lighting up with footage audio timelines. Clara's lies unraveled fast under daylight. Social media turned. Authorities moved. She was stopped at the airport before sunset. No makeup, no audience, no escape. But justice didn't feel like victory, because Aisha was still gone. They found the bus through cameras and cache trails. A mountain road. A storm. A landslide that stopped everything but Daniel's heart. He didn't wait for permission. He drove into rain that blurred the world, chasing the only thing that mattered. When he boarded the bus, soaked and breathless people stared. He didn't care. "Aisha," he said. She looked up like she was seeing a ghost. He knelt there on a dirty bus floor in a suit ruined by mud and rain, and took her hands. "You didn't ruin us," he said. "You saved us. I failed to protect my children. You didn't." She cried. He didn't stop her. "They need you," he whispered. "And I need you too. Not as help, as family. If you'll let us." Silence stretched. Then she nodded. Home felt different when they returned. The girls ran to her like light finding its source. Laughter filled rooms that once echoed. The mansion softened furniture, moved rules, loosened walls, learned how to breathe. Aisha no longer wore gloves. She sat at the table, not serving but belonging. And one evening, as they prayed before a simple meal of pasta and warm bread, Daniel realized something with a calm certainty. The storm hadn't destroyed his life. It had washed away the lie and revealed the family that had been there all along. Time did not rush their healing. It walked beside them. Months passed, not marked by headlines or court dates, but by small, ordinary miracles. Morning laughter replaced silence. Shoes piled by the door. Homework spread across the dining table. The house no longer felt like a monument to success, but like a place where life actually happened. Aisha changed too. She enrolled in night classes, something she had postponed for years because survival always came first. Daniel never framed it as charity, only belief. "You're building your future," he told her once. "I just cleared the path." When she passed her first exam, the girls celebrated like she'd won an Olympic medal jumping on the couch, until Daniel pretended to scold them and then joined in. The world outside noticed eventually. There were articles, some kind, some cruel. A billionaire. A nanny. A scandal-turned-redemption arc. Daniel shut it all down with one sentence during a rare interview. "The bravest person in my house doesn't have my last name, and she's the reason my children still smile." That was enough. The girls grew lighter. Rose stopped flinching at raised voices. Lily slept through the night. Emma spoke up in class again. Their therapist called it resilience, Daniel called it love returning to places fear once lived. One evening, months after the storm, the house filled with the smell of tomato sauce and basil. Aisha stood at the stove, laughing as Daniel fumbled with a wooden spoon. "You're stirring like the pasta offended you," she teased. "I'm taking it personally," he replied, earning an eye roll from Emma that looked suspiciously like Aisha's. They gathered around the table, no formality, no tension. Just hands joined, warmth shared. When they finished eating, Daniel didn't stand to leave. He stayed seated, heart loud in his chest. "I want to say something," he began. The girls looked at him. Aisha froze. "This family exists because someone chose us when it was easier to walk away," Daniel said. "Because she loved without protection, without power, without guarantees." His voice trembled. "Aisha, I don't want you here out of gratitude. I want you here out of choice. Ours and yours." Silence wrapped the room. Then Rose slid her small hand into Aisha's. "Please don't ever leave again." Aisha's breath broke. Tears fell freely now, not from fear, not from sacrifice, but from belonging. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. Later, when the girls were asleep, and the house hummed softly with peace, Daniel stood beside Aisha at the window. "You know," he said gently, "I used to think success was what I built." She looked at him. "It's who I didn't lose," he finished. Outside, the night was calm. Inside, a family once fractured, once lost, was whole. The moment did not arrive with fireworks or grand announcements. It came quietly on an ordinary evening that felt sacred precisely because nothing was forced. Rain tapped softly against the windows as the girls worked on a puzzle at the living room floor. Their heads bent together, laughing over missing pieces. Aisha folded laundry on the couch, humming under her breath, the sound woven naturally into the rhythm of the house. Daniel stood in the doorway, watching them, struck by a thought so heavy it nearly brought him to his knees. This was the life he had been searching for in boardrooms, acquisitions, and numbers that never loved him back. Later, after the girls were asleep, he asked Aisha to step into the garden. The air smelled like wet earth and jasmine. She wrapped her cardigan tighter, confused but calm. "Do you remember the first night you cooked here?" Daniel asked. Aisha smiled faintly. "I remember being afraid of breaking something." "You fixed everything instead," he said. She looked at him, then really looked, and saw the nervousness he couldn't hide. The man who had faced hostile takeovers without blinking now held his hands together like he was afraid they might shake apart. "I spent years thinking love was something you earned after success," Daniel said quietly. "You taught me it comes before. You gave my daughters safety when I failed to see their fear. You gave me a second chance without asking for anything in return." Aisha's eyes filled, but she didn't speak. Daniel took a breath. "I don't want you standing beside me because you feel you owe us. I want you standing here because you choose us, because you choose me." He knelt, not dramatically, but deliberately, placing something small into her trembling hands. Not a ring heavy with diamonds, but a simple band, elegant, honest, intentional. "Will you build this life with me?" he asked. "Not as the woman who saved us, but as the woman we love." For a moment the world held its breath. Then Aisha laughed softly through her tears. "I already chose you," she said. "I just didn't know I was allowed to stay." Inside, 3 small faces appeared at the window. Bare feet, tangled hair, wet eyes. "Is she staying forever?" Rose whispered loudly. Daniel smiled without looking away from Aisha. "If she says yes." Aisha turned toward the window, then back to Daniel, her heart full and steady. "Yes," she said, "I'm staying." The girls burst into cheers, running outside to wrap their arms around her legs, around Daniel's waist, around the future they had all been quietly building together. Years later, people would still talk about the scandal, the billionaire, the headlines, the fall and rise. But inside that house, none of that mattered. What mattered was this 3 children who felt safe. A woman who was finally chosen. And a man who learned that real wealth is measured not by what you own, but by who comes home to you. Years later, people would still whisper about how it all began, the scandal, the power, the woman who changed everything. But inside the house, memory softened into something warmer, something truer. On one quiet Sunday morning, Sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor as the girls sat at the table finishing breakfast. Aisha moved between them with practiced ease, tying shoelaces, brushing hair, kissing foreheads. Daniel leaned against the counter, coffee forgotten in his hand, watching the ordinary miracle unfold. Rose looked up suddenly and asked, "Do you remember when we were scared all the time?" The room went still. Aisha knelt beside her, voice gentle. "I remember," she said. "But look at you now." The girls smiled, not because the past was erased, but because it no longer defined them. That was the victory no one could headline. Not the downfall of cruelty, not the exposure of lies, but the quiet rebuilding of trust. The choice made every day to stay kind even after being hurt. To protect instead of control. To love without conditions. Daniel reached for Aisha's hand, understanding at last that family wasn't something you defended with money or reputation, but with presence, humility, and courage. And Aisha, once invisible, once disposable in the eyes of power, stood rooted and unafraid, no longer a guest in someone else's life, but a cornerstone of her own. True character is revealed not in comfort, but in moments of power. Imbalance, how we treat those who cannot protect themselves. Love is not proven by words or status, but by consistent actions, by choosing empathy over ego, and by standing up when silence is easier. If this story moved, you share your thoughts in the comments. What does real family mean to you? And if you believe stories like this remind us of what truly matters, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more deeply human stories that stay with you long after the screen fades to black.